So anyway, Vim was developed in the late 80s, originally as an Amiga clone of VI. You probably saw that because it was up on the screen for way too long. But Vim adds to VI, adds an insane amount of functionality. It's VI improved. So one of the things that's nice about Vim is that it's cross-platform. I use it from a terminal all the time, but I also use it in a GUI, like I'm doing on this Mac here. And by the way, my daily driver is a Linux, a Fedora desktop. I've got a Fedora laptop that I use all the time. I actually keep the Mac around mostly for things like Zoom and whatnot, because sometimes that stuff works better on a Mac, although lately it's been working fine. But when I'm portable, I actually like to use a Chromebook with the Linux container on it. And so I use Mac Vim on the Mac. I use just GVim everywhere else, and works great. But I also use VS Code all those places. It's cross-platform as well, and both of them are open source. Now the weird thing is that VS Code is a product from Microsoft, and it's been ages since I've intentionally said nice things about Microsoft, but I have to say VS Code is pretty cool. My Discord is being really noisy. I guess that's people joining. Don't know how to turn off server mute globally, but I'm turning it off for individual people. So by all means, chime in if you got anything you want to add to anything I'm talking about. This is, again, birds of a feather session, right? So it's not about me dominating the conversation. I think I've unmuted everybody. So this is my same presentation in VS Code. So the main difference here is by default you get this file browser over here, and you get the your text editor on the side with or on the right side with your tabs and whatnot. But if you really like the full screen thing, you can make that smaller or close it. You can certainly get the kind of full screen aspect to that. So it's not substantially different. Oops, I'm getting a lot of people. So skip that one because that's not important. Comprehensive help system. If you're not familiar with Vim, :help will actually tell you what :help does. But you can do :help for basically anything, and that documentation is all available online as well. So if you'd rather just Google for it, you can. There's a lot of the power of Vim is in keyboard shortcuts and colon commands and things like that. So there is a learning curve, but there is good documentation. Somebody want to chime in? Echo. Yeah, if you're not talking, definitely stay muted so we don't get that echo problem. All right, so colors and syntax highlighting. So this is a thing that Vim does. As it happens, that also works nicely in Vim. Let's see. Go over here. Well, it didn't pick this one up because I forgot this. I'm using a Vim trick to get this to get recognized as C code. But if I go over, let's see, I'm gonna jump ahead a little bit. This does get color or syntax highlighting because it's got an HTML extension. So actually, let's jump forward to a thing here. So text objects. Text objects are a thing in Vim, and as it happens, my VS Code, I'm using an extension. Let's see, where is it? Here we go. So this extension right here, VSCode.vim, does a reasonably good job of giving Vim key bindings to VS Code. So if you're used to the keyboard shortcuts and stuff, it's fantastic. Yeah, Bethlyn. So basically, what a text object is it's in Vim you normally do an action and a movement, right? So I want to change from where the cursor is to the end of the word. I can do CE or CW, right? What text objects do is basically give you an implied beginning and end. So instead of just being strictly from the cursor position to someplace else, you actually can say, this entire object, right? So the reason I was using HTML as an example here, I can say, here, I'll just use V to select things. So I'll do a visual selection. I can do VI and then double quote, and it'll select everything inside the double quotes. If I do VA double quote, whoops, that didn't work. I forgot to hit escape first. If I do VA double quote, it selects the quotes and everything inside, right? So now it's a visual selection. I can do things like hit capital U and make everything uppercase. In HTML, XML, and a few others, I can do VIT and select everything inside a set of tags. And it doesn't matter where you're at, right? So, I'm in the middle of this word. I say VIW, it selects the word. Works for square brackets, single and double quotes, parens, right? So it's fantastic. A trick that I actually figured out relatively recently, you know how when you delete something in Vim, and then so let's say you copy something in Vim. Let's do it this way. So I copy a line. I'm going to yank this line, right? And now I want to replace this line with the line that I yanked, right? Well, normally if I would have to paste and then select the other thing and delete it, right? But because if I do it any other way, if I delete first, then that replaces the thing that I yanked, right? But what you can do is yank the thing, do a visual selection of another thing, and then paste, and it'll just overwrite it. So anyway, that's a handy thing. Now, everything I just showed you is those are Vim tricks, right? And I'm doing all of this in VS Code. So the text objects work beautifully in VS Code. So anyway, I'm going to switch back over to Vim. And I apologize that I'm not keeping up with the Discord chat. I've got it up on my other screen over here and kind of trying to keep an eye on it, but not doing a great job. So anyway, all right, moving on. So one big difference between real Vim and VS Code, Vim has this concept of buffers, windows, and tabs. So buffers are how I'm handling this little mini presentation, right? I actually have a bunch of basically files open at the same time, and I'm just flipping between those buffers. That's called buffers. Now, we can do windows in Vim. So this is basically two windows with the same content open, right? Close that one, and you can actually have multiple views of the same thing open, and swap back and forth between them, have them at different places in the in the file. So if you're ever editing a really large file and you want to be at the top and in the middle at the same time, so you can see them both, you just open them up in separate windows, and it's great. Tabs work like browser tabs or something. They have the same concept. Now, what visually, I can do the same thing in VS Code, right? So I've got tabs open for all of these things. That's what all these are up here, right? So I'll take my buffers, windows, and tabs thing here, and I can drag it off to the side, and now I've got it split over here. If I wanted to, I could have done a right click and split left, split right. So I could have done a split left or split right and done the same kind of a thing that I did in Vim, and had two views of it at the same time. So that works. That works great. And you can just rearrange things the way that you would with any other tabs in a browser or something like that. That all visually works great. Now, they don't have the concept of a buffer where you have one window or tab that has multiple files open that you can just flip between. But being a GUI editor, I don't know how big of a deal that is. But buffers are great when you're SSH into a box and you're doing stuff from a terminal or whatever. Now, the other thing though that I can do in Vim that I can't do in VS Code is there are several commands. I can do buff do, and what this will do is actually go through every open buffer and do an action to it, right? So if I want to do a substitution on let's say we want to say we're going to do %s, and we're going to say if we see the word Windows, we want to make that all uppercase, and we're just going to do that everywhere. And you see it actually says, pattern not found, but then it shows where it found things, right? And it does it across every file. So, oops, of course I lost my place now. I have to go back to, where was I? 10. And I told it to make it lowercase instead of making it uppercase. That was a typo. So if I go back up, yeah, backslash capital L makes it lowercase. I don't know what I was thinking. I'd have to do backslash capital U to make everything that matched uppercase. But anyway, you get the idea. So things like this, I can't do this in VS Code. If I want to do something like this, I have to jump over to Vim. So, there are still reasons why I definitely need Vim around. Anyway, visual modes, I kind of showed you visual modes a little bit earlier. I was doing character visual modes, and that's where I was doing like VIW. This is a character visual mode that basically it's basically a visual selection of that word right now. Line visual modes, and those are, you get into those with V, and then you can just move around, or you can select a word or something like that. And you can, if you hit O, you can go to the other end and move the other end around, that sort of thing, right? So line-based visual modes, you do Shift V to get into a line-based visual mode. That lets you select entire lines at a time, including like the line feed at the end. Now, fun little bit here is if you're in one visual mode and you do the key for the other visual mode, it'll actually switch you to the other visual mode, right? So if I if I select this and then do Shift V, it selects, you know, all that. If I just hit V, it switches me back to this. Now, block visual modes, you do Control V to get into that, and that actually lets you select like whole blocks of characters. Now, I do have a setting turned on that lets my block go past the end of a line, but this lets me do things like, let me just grab this whole thing, and I'm going to yank that. I'm going to go to the end, and I'm going to paste. And so I can paste in a square block of text here, right? So that's just wonderful when I'm dealing with like tables in Markdown or something like that. It's a really nice feature. So, and by the way, if you want to talk and I didn't unmute you, just say something on the text channel, and I'll take care of it for you. So I've been hearing a lot of joining and leaving, and I haven't kept up with it. So okay. And by the way, these visual modes, these work great with that Vim extension for VS Code. An interesting thing that VS Code has that Vim doesn't exactly is VS Code actually has the concept of having multiple cursors. So there's a way in native VS Code to just like select various points, and like when you start typing, it just starts typing at every one of those points, right? So that's a pretty nifty feature. Something you can do in with a block visual mode is you can have a selection, and you can hit capital I and do things like this, or hit capital A and go like that, and you can actually do this is how you can comment out like a whole block or something like that real easily. The way that that's implemented in VS Code with the Vim extension is by basically setting up multiple cursors for you. So it ends up working with the same keystrokes. But anyway, that's a fun one. All right, so moving on, Vim features. Vim has multi-level undo. VS Code with the Vim extension definitely does that. It has branching undo, which is a weird thing where you can make some changes, you can undo a couple of steps, you can redo like partway, go do something else and undo and go back. Like you can take a different branch back. It's really weird, but it's a thing that it'll do. But one of the really spiffy things you can do is colon earlier. So like, say you've gone down a rabbit hole, you've been doing something for half an hour. It's all wrong. You just want to go back to where you were an hour earlier. You can say colon earlier 1H, right? And let's say you do that and it's like, oh, I went back a little too far. You can then do colon later 15M and go forward 15 minutes. So rather than having to sit there and hit and pound the U key to keep going back, right? Now, as far as I know, you cannot do those things in VS Code, but honestly, I haven't tried, so it might work. But yeah, I'm just not sure. Anyway, tab completion, that is definitely a thing that I get spoiled by in Vim. I don't know if you noticed, but when I was typing the colon earlier, I typed a few letters and then hit tab. I do that all over the place. It's got tab completion for commands. It's got tab completion for file names. It's pretty spiffy. And I don't think VS Code will do all that, but I can't be 100% sure. We've got formatting commands like colon center, colon left, colon right to bounce things around. Somebody's not getting video. That's not good. Is everybody else getting video, or is this? Okay. All right. Good. Just wanted to make sure. All right. So like say colon center, colon left, colon right. So obviously if I'm on this line, and I do colon right, I can move this over. I can select a bunch of things and do colon left and left justify all of it, you know, and I can select that all and do colon center and move it all to the center, right? So that's kind of spiffy, but I don't use it very often, so I actually don't know if that works in the Vim extension. Oops. There's so one of the things that Vim does over VI had macros. They work easier in Vim. If you've ever noticed, if you do like let's say you do something like that, and all of a sudden you see this recording thing at the bottom, that means you hit Q and in this case W. What you're doing is it's now recording everything that you type into the W register. When you hit Q, then it stops, and the contents again are in that W register. So if I do, try that again. So if I do, you know, append escape, and then hit Q. Now if I go down here and I quote WP, it actually pastes in the contents of that. So, you know, I hit backspace, you know, because I made a mistake, and the other stuff, and hit escape, right? So now if I do @, oops, if I do @W, whoops, no, I'm not hitting, I'm doing something wrong. @W, there we go. Then it actually plays back the contents of that register like I was, like I had typed it. All the stuff with registers is actually a VI thing that's been around forever. It's the recording thing, the queue thing that's a Vim thing. And I'll be real honest, I haven't played around with this stuff in the Vim in the VS Code Vim either. I don't know how well that works. Again, not something I do absolutely every day, and usually by the time I get to that point, then I'll pop over to Vim for real. But it's certainly something to try. And by the way, you can clear a register by just doing Q and then the register and then Q again, because you basically recorded nothing to it. If you want to append to a register, you would do Q and then like capital W appends. And then of course you can always do you know, like quote W and then you know, P to paste, or quote WY to yank, or you know, into that register or something like that. So anyway, and now here's a place where I think there's a I won't necessarily say that Vim is better. It is, but I won't necessarily say that, because it's very, very different with VS Code. So the regular expression support in Vim is amazing. The thing is, it's more or less based on old basic regular expressions, but with a bunch of extensions. Okay, it is not the extended regular expressions that everybody's gotten used to with PCRE. The regular expressions in VS Code are all PCRE. Even if I let's go back over here, if I can do colon, you know, %s, you know, whatever, and if I type in a regular expression here, it's going to be a PCRE regular expression, even though it looks like, if you can see down at the bottom of the screen, it looks like I'm doing, you know, a Vim command. It's not going to take Vim regular expressions. It's going to take PCRE. So, you know, PCRE is great. I don't really have a huge problem with that, but it is a little bit of a transition thing. The searching in Vim, though, has some really cool features. Ink search lets you do things like, so if I start typing, it'll actually show the matches, and it'll start moving to where those matches are, which is kind of a cool thing. If you ever want to like peek forward in a file, but you don't actually want to move the cursor, you can just search for something you know is there, and then when you hit escape, the cursor goes right back where it was. That's what this : ink search does. Set ignore case, ignores case as you'd expect. Set smart case actually modifies the ignore case thing. Basically, ignore case makes it case insensitive. Smart case says that you must mean the exact case you're typing if you're not just typing lowercase, right? So if I start typing first with lowercase f, it finds that where I've got first with an uppercase f. If I do capital F, that matches, right? But if I do some other case, then it doesn't match. So all of that said, VS Code has its own search functionality that's all built into the GUI, and there's you can control I believe it's Control F. It's probably Command F on the Mac. Yeah. So you can do searches in here, and you can tell it whether you want to match case or match whole words or just use regular expressions, and whatnot like that. But you can start typing things too. So anyway, it's good. It's different. Anyway, spell checking is something that Vim does, which is actually kind of cool. You've got you can actually, when you're in GUI Vim, you can actually do it all with the mouse, kind of like you'd expect. Just right click, and it's works like you'd expect. You can also do it from the command line. I can say, what is it, Z equal? Yeah. And I can kick out all the possibilities, right? Oops. If I say 1Z equal, it'll actually just pick the first thing out of the list, which is kind of handy. Turns out there's an extension for spell checking for VS Code, so it's not like a huge advantage or anything, but it is a thing that you can do in Vim, which a lot of people don't realize. We talked about text objects, folding. I can basically make things go away while I don't want to see them, right? So, whoops. See. So that's kind of cool. VS Code actually has a thing that'll do something like that, so that's not even a big deal. Sessions, this whole little presentation is basically saved to a session that I can open back up, and it pulls up Vim basically with all the settings that I had when I originally worked on it, including like fonts and everything else. It's pretty spiffy, but kind of turns out that VS Code does something vaguely similar. I can open up a folder at a time, and I can add them to workspaces, and then I can save my workspace definition. So then I can just reopen that and get everything back like I had it, including like where the tabs are located and stuff like that. So that's pretty spiffy. Let's see here. So scripting plugins, you can write your own Vim script and do lots of things in Vim. One of the silly things that that I use Vim for, I think I did this earlier. If I search for something, it highlights that thing, and it stays highlighted until you type : NOH, no highlight. It's no HL search is what that's short for, right? And that clears that highlight. But I actually have that mapped to Control L. Control L on a terminal basically redraws the screen. So I basically overloaded it so it does a colon no H and a Control L. So when I search for something, I can just hit Control L and make it go away. So it's silly little script, or a little customization that I've made to my own Vim. Which, by the way, all that's on my GitHub account. If anybody cares, I can get you the link. But plugins, there's tons and tons of plugins. I used to say I didn't really use any of them because I had to use Vim from a terminal so much on different systems. I didn't want to worry about having my Vim, set up. But I've given up on that a long time ago. There are a few plugins that I just can't live without. A big one is called Tabularize. I don't know how many of you write code where you end up with hash rockets. End up with things like this, right? And you want to line them up. You can do :tabularize, and I want to line those up on the hash rockets, right? That right there is worth the cost of admission. It's great. I love it. I use it practically daily. So that's one I haven't been able to replace on VS Code. Actually, there's a lot of formatting stuff some auto formatting stuff that I can do in Vim that I haven't figured out how to do in VS Code. So a lot of times I pop over to Vim to do those things. And of course, there's tons more, but I'm going to stop going on about Vim, and I'm going to talk more about VS Code. So again, most of the normal, most of the stuff that I've shown you actually worked great in this Vim extension. But when I do run into one of those things where, I really need this in Vim, well, there just happens to be a Open in Vim extension that is, not a bad way to handle it. It's not perfect, but I can just be in a thing here, and that said it was Command Shift P. Oh yeah, I got it in Vim. Open in Vim, and it opens the built-in terminal. Oh, whoops. It's we'll say open read only for now, and then in the built-in terminal here I have Vim open. Now there's a setting for where to open it. You can have it open in GVim, or you can have it open inline in like I did here. I can just move this around, and this is real Vim in the terminal. So that's usually enough to be able to handle whatever I need. Interesting little thing in VS Code, there's an option to autosave. If you do that, transitioning back and forth is pretty smooth, because if I make a change in Vim and write and quit, then VS Code updates automatically. They don't get out of sync that way. So anyway, let's get out of that. Which, by the way, VS Code has a terminal. Oops, I guess that's not the right key. I forgot. I actually don't use the Mac that often. But anyway, you actually can pull up an integrated terminal, so you can pull up a shell while you're in the middle of doing whatever. There it goes. Anyway, so that's kind of a spiffy thing. Of course, in Vim you can do :shell, and you can do the same thing. So, what are you going to do? Anyway, so let me see here. What else did I want to mention? Oh, yeah. So, talking about extensions, there is one other thing that could be just the holy grail eventually. There is a Neo-Vim extension, and I am really looking forward to using this. So this requires using a nightly build of Neo-Vim, and while I'm told that is completely stable, I haven't spent the time to go and track down, how to build it and everything else. So I honestly, and like I mentioned before, I'm bouncing around from computer to computer. So I just haven't gone to the trouble of setting it up. But with this, you can actually have Vim take over the text editor part of the VS Code window, which is really weird. But it's a cool thing, because then it would be real Vim. Neo-Vim also has a cool thing where it can work with the language server protocol that VS Code uses for things like syntax highlighting and whatnot. So a lot of the plugins that are being made for VS Code, actually you actually can use those in Vim. The latest upstream Vim actually has support for that even. So there's some real cool cooperation going on there. Now, I've talked a lot about why I end up having to go back to Vim. Let me talk about a couple of things that keep me in VS Code. One of them is the live share extension. So this is a extension that's developed by Microsoft. It does require that you log in with either a Microsoft account or a GitHub account. But it basically just does that to validate that you are who you say you are. It doesn't actually use any of your information. But with live share, you can actually start up a session and you sign in, and then you can basically share either a read write or a read only session in your editor. This is great for like pair programming type things. It's great when you're trying to debug something with coworkers. I use it a lot. So you can actually, like I say, you can share read write. You can even share the terminal windows and stuff, so the other people can see what's if you're running your code and you're showing them what it's doing. They can see the terminal where all that's going on. It's pretty cool. If I hadn't been swapping back and forth between VS Code and Vim, I would have shown you another little thing that VS Code does. I've got this thing called Keycaster. That's the thing that's making letters on the screen, right? VS Code actually has that functionality built in, which is pretty darn cool. So you can turn that on, and actually, if you're doing a presentation in VS Code, you can turn that on and show people what you're typing, right? So let's see. What did I not talk about? Well, VS Code is meant to be more of an actual IDE, so it has things like debugging and things like that built in. There's some pretty spiffy extensions for. Close out of this here. Go to extensions. Let's see here. Which one was I going to pull up? Lost my train of thought. Oh no. That's not what I wanted to do. Go. Yes, that was what I was doing. GitLens. So there are a number of extensions like this that actually extend. VS Code has built-in Git support, which there's the fugitive extension for Vim, so you can do a lot of Vim or a lot of Git stuff straight in Vim as well. But there's some nifty stuff that you can do with like seeing graphs of your Git log and all sorts of other things. I don't know if you noticed, but when I'm in an editor, there's this little pop-up that actually does a get blame kind of inline, which is kind of spiffy. I don't have to actually run get blame; it's just kind of there all the time. You know, and I can sit here and I can change to a different branch and stuff like that. That's all built in to VS Code, so that's all cool stuff. Anyway, I think. Yeah, no, there was one other thing. There's something that I haven't been using a ton of, but I have started to play around with. VS Code has a thing called dev containers. So if you want to do development in a language that you don't already have, you know, all set up, like say you're going to start doing some Go development, but you don't have Go installed, you can actually grab a Go dev container. If you've got Docker installed, you can use that to grab a whole runtime, and so all of your you know, compiling and everything else will all happen in that dev container, and you don't have to mess with any of it. On that note, one of the other things that VS Code does, it's an extension. Let me go over here. There's a series of extensions actually. But there's this remote development extension that will actually let you connect to a remote system and then edit files as though you were on that system. Now, you know, granted, Vim's had something like this forever, so you know, it's just another way to do it. But you know, if you're in Windows and you know, you're running the Windows VS Code and you want to work inside of a Windows subsystem for Linux. You know, container, you can do that with this extension. There's an SSH one that will let you, you know, be on one system and edit files on another via SSH. That's interesting. That's two different ones. Then there's one for containers, so you can basically have whatever you're doing inside of a Docker container. So that's a pretty spiffy thing. Anyway. There's like a billion of these things. I've just obviously just showing off a few, yeah. Anyway, I think that's about everything I wanted to talk about. How about you all? Anybody want to chime in?
Everybody starts out muted. If you want me to make it open, I can do that now.
Yeah, that'd be great.
Okay. There you go. Everybody should be able to unmute now.
Ah, fantastic. Thank you.
You may or may not have to leave the channel and come back for it to like take effect though. So if you wanted to speak and you can't, just leave and come back.
Or like say something on the text channel. I think I can undo the server unmute thing.
Yeah, you can manually unmute people by right-clicking their name.
Anybody have any questions or anything? Questions, comments?
Steve, I come to your Birds of a Feather almost any time I'm at Linux Stuff, and I always write down 10 new things about Vim that I didn't know and usually wind up using half of them at work. Do you have a text document online with just your favorite tricks as you pick them up that you maintain, or is there any other like ongoing keeping up with Steve's new tricks resource?
No, but that would have been a great idea. If you can go back in time about 10 years and tell me to do that, that would be awesome.
Yeah, because it's like, well, what new things can I learn about Vim? The answer is always half a dozen at least. So.
There's a book called Practical Vim that I'm told is fantastic for that kind of thing. You can just kind of peruse it and pick up a half a dozen things. It's from the guy that used to do. He had a series of videos on Vim, I don't know. I'm one of those people. I never get around to actually looking at these things. I'm literally looking at a copy of actual Vim, and I think I've barely cracked it open because I do things the hard way. But yeah, I would take a look at that. Neil's the guy that wrote that. I had to think about his name for a second. Anybody else have any questions or anything?
Oh, you're beating the crap out of that keyboard.
I'm not sure who that is.
Yeah. Golf.
Anything? Anybody? Well, I hope that was useful. Like I say, had I noticed the call for papers go out, I probably would have turned this into an actual presentation. I just unfortunately have been heads down on a bunch of work stuff and didn't even notice it until it was a week past due.
Last minute's always fun.
So, anybody? Questions? Anything? Y'all are being way too quiet.
Call them out.
We just ended the container talk a bit early, so we all, I think, jumped in here, but I don't think a lot of us has context. But I would like to say I absolutely love Vim, so props for that. But I have no idea what you talked about was about specifically, so I will defer to others.
Well, so one of these years I'm actually going to record that little presentation that I do in Vim. But I basically run through a little presentation on all the things I like about Vim, and what I was doing was kind of showing how most of those things work as well in VS Code. There's a Vim extension for VS Code that basically gives you a lot of the same keyboard shortcuts and stuff. Makes it very functional. There's also an open in Vim extension for VS Code that for those times when I need real Vim, I can just pop over into it, like stay inside VS Code but pop into Vim. And then the last thing was one of these years the main line of Neo-Vim should let you use there's a Neo-Vim extension that requires right now that using the nightly builds, but eventually, hopefully, the mainline builds, you'll be able to use that and actually have real Vim as the editor inside of VS Code. So you get all of the cool features.
I was going to actually ask you, since I'm assuming you're a big Vim user, what do you think of Neo-Vim versus the classic Vim build, I guess? Neo-Vim is a complete rewrite, I believe. Is that correct?
Well, not exactly. No, Neo-Vim is basically a bunch of the Vim community decided to go in and take a hatchet to the Vim source code and actually like clean it up for the first time in 30 years, right? So Vim still supported every old Unix imaginable, and who on this planet has seen an Ultrix box in the last 25 years, right? Do you really need to carry around Ultrix support? So on and so forth, right? Like there's just all this old stuff that was still being supported. They modernized the code base. They took some chunks of Vim, like the event handling, and instead of Vim having its own event handling, they actually just farmed that out to an existing library, right? So just a bunch of this kind of stuff that just makes the code base cleaner, smaller, and it just makes the whole thing more functional. One of the complaints that I'd heard from people who were developing Vim extensions before Neo-Vim is that basically the way the event loop worked, it only worked on keystrokes, right? So you couldn't have any kind of an asynchronous thing happening, right? So that's one of the things that Neo-Vim tackled, and they added asynchronous support. That actually got merged back into mainline Vim. So the evidence is that, you know, Neo-Vim is going to be the, you know, going out doing all the bleeding edge stuff, and the really cool stuff will get merged back into Vim proper. So it's a good thing all around, right? I was a little worried about it ending up being a fork, you know, like a permanent fork when it started, but so far evidence has been to the contrary. You know, Vim has only gotten better, and Neo-Vim's gone off and done cool stuff.
So here's one question. I took a stab at writing a couple of Vim plugins ages ago, and specifically trying to do this with the Python support for Vim. And you know, I understand that Vim script can do a lot of things, but in theory, they support, I believe, Python, possibly Ruby, and a couple other languages for their plugins. But the way they're done is so ugly from a dev perspective. Like, I can't walk through the code. I can't really test it. It's sort of like a code block, and then like I forget. It's like you basically inject a block of text that will pipe to the Python interpreter. Has the Vim or the Python support gotten any better in Vim, or is that still?
Well, okay, I can't answer that specifically because I've never tried. Okay, but my understanding is that yes, a lot of that's gotten a lot better with the asynchronous support in Neo-Vim. If you want to see an example of that kind of thing in action, based on what I know, which again I didn't develop it, and I don't know a ton about it. There's a project called ALE, A-L-E. It stands for Asynchronous Linting Engine. Basically, it's a plugin for Vim that does all the same stuff that the old Syntastic would do. You know, with